Hi everyone, it is Monday, so it is Life or Biz Wisdom. Hello to you all. I hope you're having a great start to the week. I thought that for my Life or Biz Wisdom contribution today, my live video, that I would actually recap some of what was discussed that came out of the owner, Anna Osherov, is having a week-long launch with amazing speakers and workshop teachers, or play shop as I prefer to call it. You've probably heard me say that a few times now. And so mine today was on how to use EFT, which is Emotional Freedom Technique, and I'll explain what that is if you're not familiar with it in a moment, to get over overwhelm. So first of all, we talked a bit about what overwhelm was and what we thought it was for each of us and how it shows up. And then I was taking the group through a very basic emotional freedom technique, the procedure or the recipe, so that they are actually now able to undertake doing some tapping, which is the common name for EFT, at home. So in terms of overwhelm, and the reason that I chose overwhelm as the topic for using EFT with is because it's really rampant. Probably there'd be very few of us that never get overwhelmed. Of course, some of us get more overwhelmed than others, and we may get overwhelmed at particular times, or there may be some people who actually have overwhelm as a recurring pattern for them. It seems like so many things in their lives overwhelm them. So I'm going to touch on why that might be the case shortly. But I know that overwhelm absolutely affects our productivity, because when we're overwhelmed, it reduces our capacity for doing the work that we need to be doing in terms of productivity in our own personal lives, our level of enjoyment, getting things done around the house, working in with the family effectively, all that sort of thing. So it is really common and it has a huge negative impact. So to me, overcoming overwhelm is really important, and I believe that EFT is a great way to manage it and in fact to prevent it. So to me they go hand in hand, and that's why I wanted to focus on that in my workshop today. So talking about overwhelm, I started with a definition. Apparently the word overwhelm dates back to something like the early 14th century, which is amazing. And it means to take down or overthrow. And of course, back in those days, that probably would have referred to battle and physical, dealing with physical threats and survival and death, and using power to be able to do that, to be able to overwhelm the enemy. But this day and age, for most of us in our Western societies, overwhelm actually probably relates more to stress or to panic. And so it certainly can still be a physical threat. If we're overwhelmed physically by somebody, they may be abusive, verbally, physically, in whatever way, definitely we can feel overwhelmed. But on a day-to-day basis, I think most of us are likely to experience overwhelm that is due to stress because of things like issues with our relationships that we have, whether that's at work, whether that's at home, or it might be around our workloads. We've got too much on, competing priorities. Or it might be around being overwhelmed because we're a bit confused. We don't know what it is that we need to be doing, say with a project, piece of work or something. And we can be overwhelmed as a result of that. So when we think about those sort of situations, what I was focusing on with the workshop or play shop attendees is how does overwhelm feel for them? What does it look like in those circumstances? So there were examples around feeling stressed, a feeling of anxiety, muscle tension, maybe shortness of breath, holding the breath, feeling like you want to actually hide, those sorts of things, which are pretty common. And there was actually an interesting discussion about the difference between panic and overwhelm. And what we came to the conclusion about within the group was that panic will probably tend to be a shorter time period. So we might panic because we've got something to do that we're not sure what to do as the next step, but we're not going to have it for weeks, for instance. And that's not to minimize panic disorder at all. But the thought then with overwhelm and comparison was that overwhelm would probably build up over time based on a whole lot of different experiences, almost a layered approach. And it was interesting to have that discussion so that we could differentiate between them. The other thing in terms of what it looked like and what were some of the reasons, there were a lot of examples given, such as what I've just given you then. What I explained was that there used to be, you're probably familiar with the fight or flight mode in terms of responding to a stressor or a perceived threat or a real threat. But there's actually in more recent years an additional third component in this these modes of coping, and that is the freeze mode. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. So there's fight, flight, and freeze. And overwhelm is the freeze mode. And what that means is, as I said before, one participant talked about, really wanting to stay small, and that is to protect ourselves. We might actually do it physically, or if we don't, then we'll do it emotionally. Because when there's overwhelm, our emotions are shut down. And that's because we're in survival mode. So if you think of, say, some of the animals out in nature, the smaller animals in particular, will shut down and freeze and play dead, so to speak, in the hope that their bigger potential potential I want to say killers, but that sounds really brutal, animals that can be a danger to us, is that the hope is that if we play dead, that they'll think we are, and then they'll move on. So it's a survival mannerism, or mechanism, I should say, for animals, and it is also for us as humans. Now, the problem with that is that our emotions aren't able to be expressed. And that's very much where EFT comes in, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But I want to make the point, and this is something we actually discussed quite a bit in the workshop today, which was that overwhelm can occur, doesn't have to all the time, but it does to an extent for a lot of us who have had difficult childhood situations, particularly if we were younger than 7. And that's because in those really formative years, we are sponges. We take in everything, and very much on the unconscious or the subconscious level. We're not even necessarily aware of it, and we certainly at that age, we don't intellectually understand a lot of what's happening around us, but we can nonetheless take it in on the unconscious level. And we're egocentric when we're that young. And that's great because it helps us get our needs met by, temper tantrums. I want this, sort of thing. But where it can actually be a problem for us is when we believe, because we're egocentric, that anything that's happening around us, such as mum and dad fighting, for instance, it's because of us. We blame ourselves. And that's where a lot of us develop shame. And the problem with that is, at that young age, on an unconscious level, we can make limiting beliefs and decisions that affect us and are carried right through to adult years and beyond on an unconscious level. So that might be things like making the decision that if I'm really quiet and a good girl or boy, as in a good person, then mum and dad won't fight. And what can happen in years after that as adults is we feel we have to always be good, inverted commas, to be able to get the love and to have peace around us. Or it might be a limiting belief that I can't voice what it is that I want because it might lead to people arguing. And again, that can be carried through to adulthood. So where EFT comes into it is that it is a really amazing, effective tool for freeing our emotions and helping us to identify on a conscious level what those limiting beliefs or decisions might be and dismantling them and in fact replacing them with more healthy ones. So EFT, if you're not familiar with it, is emotional freedom technique. And basically it's been described as a psychological acupuncture. So it uses the meridians. It actually uses acupressure, which is produced by tapping. You might have seen people tapping on their faces and parts of their body and that sort of thing. And that is, the tapping is the acupressure that's applied on specific meridians in our body. And it's like the blocked emotions, because we're in survival mode and we're keeping ourselves small and we're shutting down, our emotions are blocked and the meridians are blocked. And so we actually can use the acupressure with the tapping to unblock those meridians and let the emotions flow, releasing them. And what that means is that we're able to then make new beliefs and decisions that are far more healthier for us. Now, I won't go through the actual technique of EFT, that's perhaps for another time. But I wanted you to get a sense of how overwhelm affects us and how something like EFT, because it works on the unconscious level, that can go right back to those early childhood experiences and in fact, even in the womb and even in past lives, if that's something that you believe in, to really unpack why we might be experiencing overwhelm now. And people who experience overwhelm on a regular basis are more likely to have very early experiences that are the cause. There's a phrase that I use quite frequently in my work, and that is that the problem is not always the problem. And this is a really good example when I say that the problem, the person coming to me to help them with overwhelm, yes, it's an issue, yes, but it's a symptom. It is still a problem, but it's a symptom. It's not just a matter of taking away the symptom and then everything's fine. That's like a Band-Aid effect. It's actually more about unpacking, as I said, particularly if it's a really big issue and it's been over a period of time, why are there triggers that happen even in our adulthood that, in fact, it was said today, they can be irrational triggers, an overreaction to something, feeling overwhelmed more than what the situation perhaps warrants. And that's a clue that there's stuff in the past that modalities, therapies like EFT can really help. So I hope that that's been of interest to you, of benefit to you. Please, if you want more information, if you'd like some support from me around how to manage your overwhelm, how to prevent it, and if you're wanting to learn more about EFT, then I really encourage you to contact me. So the contact details are on the page here. I look forward to hearing from you with regards to that, and otherwise look forward to seeing you next Monday for the next edition of Life or Biz Wisdom. Thank you. Bye for now.